All right, it's time for Yogi and the Beach Man. Hi, I'm Jim the Yogi.
And I'm Rick Beach, the Beach Man.
We're two Michigan transplants now living in Southwest Florida.
In fact, we're cousins born in 1964, just a month apart.
I like to meditate.
And I like to play bass in a band.
I'm into chanting Om.
And I'm into throwing down some classic rock.
But together, we're on a mission
to promote people that are helping other people.
We want to make the world a better place.
One conversation at a time.
So sit back,
turn up the volume,
and get ready to laugh.
Because we like to have fun
while we spread the love.
Interviewing lovely people, yes, we have fun.
All right, welcome to Yogi and the Beach Man. Today we have Phillis Dewitt with us. She's the author of the book, I'm Still Standing. This is a remarkable story. I know you're all going to love it. Phillis, welcome to the show. I'm Jim the Yogi.
I'm Rick Beach, the Beach Man. How are you doing?
Thank you. And I'm very grateful you guys are having me today. Thank you.
And you have some serious street cred. You're a doctor of nursing, I believe.
Yes, I have a doctorate degree and a postdoctorate, actually, as a nurse practitioner.
Very good.
My oldest daughter is in the master's program, so she'll be graduating as RN, and so she'll have her MSN, I think in February or March.
That's awesome. I teach at 4 universities in their graduate programs, so
that's her goal. And she attended the Port Charlotte High School nursing program in the VOTAC when she was a teenager. She's 31 now. And,
very cool.
She graduated as an LPN and just kept it going. But that's what she wants to do, is get into just teaching and being a...
That's great. Tell her to connect with me.
I was just going to say that. Maybe I'll hook you guys up for some career advice, because she just did get a job offer, and I can't say it here, but it looks pretty good. So
that's great.
For the next year's fall semester. So that's kind of cool.
Great.
Designing it from scratch. So that's cool.
Awesome. And I'm a BSN.
Yeah, and Jim's a nurse too.
I knew that. Traveling nurse, right?
I was traveling, yeah. We decided to settle down and build community. So we're here in Port Charlotte now. And
awesome.
Yeah, I worked for 4.5 years as almost 5 years as a labor and delivery nurse. And now I'm getting into foot care nursing.
Okay. Labor and delivery was an area I never worked in, although I was a health supervisor of a couple different hospitals. So I had to kind of cover that area, but that was not my expertise.
Yeah, it's an interesting field, that's for sure.
And I'm just a solar guy. I make electricity and save trees and heat water. So
there you go. Love it.
People emergency power in hurricanes, which,
that's
as you well know. How'd you do in the storm, by the way?
We did really, really well. We live in a section that's only got 11-foot elevation, but we've survived 3 hurricanes and never had water. And sadly, we don't have solar, but we do have a generator.
Cool.
And it goes on automatically. So
yep. I know them well.
So. What part of Punta Gorda are you in?
We're in what they call the PGI, Punta Gorda Isles bird section. So we are probably about 3 miles from Fisherman's Village.
Okay.
Off of Albatross down there. I know you're...
Yes, we are right off Albatross.
You told me your street name. I know how to get to your house.
Yes, we are literally right off Albatross.
Yeah.
Yeah, Rick actually lived in the Isles.
Yeah, I lived off Via Tripoli and Magdalena.
Okay. Oh yeah, that's not. We walk over there.
Yeah, it's nice. I had a condo over there, I bought a house over here. So
nice. Yeah, we have a house here on the water, but we've been blessed and not had any flooding at all since we bought it in 2018.
That's great.
Yeah.
So tell us about your story. I mean, that's you want to come on this podcast and share your story and about your book.
Absolutely.
And how did all this start for you?
So the interesting part, so the title of my book is How I'm Still Standing, How God Turned My Pain into Purpose. And so I start with telling everybody I grew up as a foster child, and my first foster home that I was placed in, my foster dad was arrested for bank embezzlement. I was moved to a different foster home because my foster mother happened to be pregnant with child number 2 and a husband going to prison, and it just wasn't going to work for her. So I got placed into another foster home, and that foster dad started molesting me. And I was in foster care because of a long history of being molested since I was about 3. And so the state of Illinois, actually at the age of 16, ended up making me an emancipated minor, which meant you're basically on your own. So you're, living on your own, doing all the responsibilities of an adult, even though you're only 16, which sounds exciting for a 16-year-old until you go to try to get an apartment and they don't want to rent to a 16-year-old, or you try to go buy a car and they don't want to give a loan to a 16-year-old. And so it was really hard. It was a challenging time in my life. But then you fast forward, and I ended up getting married and having children. And after 3 children, I ended up having to have a hysterectomy. And they said it was largely due to a lot of the sexual abuse I'd had when I was younger. And so we started doing foster care and fostered over 100 children, adopted 10 of those. And my whole adult life, honestly, has been doing things that have to do with my past. And so I tell people that my past wasn't really something that destroyed me. It actually made me who I am and gave me the passion for doing the things that I do, including nursing. I was one of the first sexual assault nurse examiners in this central Illinois because of my past. So, yeah.
So you didn't run from your past, you faced it head on.
Wow. Yes. And so my first husband got cancer. And so he died after 27 years of marriage. But about 2.5 years before he passed away, he said to me, I really think someday you're going to write a book. And I said, oh, wow. And he had already gone with me to confront my abusers. So he was physically present with me when I confronted these childhood abusers. So he heard what they said, and he was able to validate my story because, quite shockingly, not one of them denied what they did. So as my husband's looking at the end of his life, he said, I just want to have a meeting in our living room. And he videotaped himself with our pastor and his wife, a doctor and his wife, the psychologist I had been seeing for many, many years, and videotaped what it was like to marry me in the beginning, someone that was trying to heal from all of the trauma and abuse, what it was like to see me after I was healed, and what it was like to confront each of the abusers and what they said. And so he had the foresight to want to do something like that. And we actually were able to use that video in the writing of the book.
Wow. I got to ask, what was that like for you to face your abusers? I mean, what kind of emotions? What?
At that point in my life, I was so healed internally that it wasn't hard for me. In fact, I wasn't even angry with them. If you look at statistically, the majority of the people that abuse children, sexually abused children, have often been abused. And so I tried to look at them as an unhealed victim, and I tried to view myself as a healed victim. And so I didn't attack them. I wasn't angry with them. I wanted them to validate my story, but I also had questions that I wanted them to answer, and they did, because I wasn't angry. So I was a whole different person by the time I confronted them than I was 15 years before.
What kind of questions were you asking them?
First of all, I wanted to know how old I was when they abused me. I shared with them the memories that I had, and I asked them, is this what you remember? For instance, one of my early abuses happened in a small town called Deer Creek. And I said, it was at my uncle's house, and it was an older cousin that in my own head, I thought was about 18 or 19. Well, when we confronted him, he said, Phyllis, I was about 17 and you were 3. And so it put some perspective there for me. But I said, I remember there was a big, huge wraparound porch. I remember when you walk in the house, there was a staircase. And so it was bringing credibility to a lot of the snippets of memories that I would have. And so, again, I did ask each of them if they had been abused. And at least 3 had abuse in their own life.
And we know that this type of abuse leaves lifelong trauma. How did you heal from it?
So interestingly, in my book, I talk about how as an emancipated minor, I actually was pretty overwhelmed, and I took a bunch of sleeping pills and went out driving. And that was my first hospitalization in a psychiatric hospital. So I'm 16, 17 years old, and I am being admitted into an adolescent unit. And so that was kind of shocking for me. And so I went through a lot of therapy. When I got married and I had my first daughter, I had a whole I don't know, a whole range of emotions, and most of them panicky. I'm like, oh my gosh, how am I going to protect her? People are going to want to abuse her, and I wasn't even sure I wanted to leave my husband alone with her, and so there were all these issues that kept coming to surface over and over, and especially at Christmas time. The first sentence in my book says, "I hate Christmas." Because in my childhood, my father worked for a company that they were off from Christmas to New Year's. And it was horrible and I hated it. And so I learned to just detest Christmas. But so as a young mom, I often
When you
ended
said
up
your father was off at that week, is that your foster father or your
my
biological?
biological father. This is back when I was a young child, and he never sexually abused me, but he was a very physically violent man and beat my mom up all the time. She was in the hospital at least once from that. He would throw her food on the floor and made her eat it off the floor. And the only time he would physically harm us is if we tried to stop him from hitting her. But he was mentally abusive to all of us. So this was my biological father in my early years that I'm talking about.
Now, how many siblings did you have?
Two brothers. I had a brother that was 11 months older than me, and then I ended up having a brother that was 11 years younger than me.
Okay.
But so I hated Christmas. And so every Christmas, I would have this struggle, even as a married mom now, with all these memories that I would have. And so a lot of times I would end up back in the hospital doing self-harming behavior or with struggling with my eating disorder. And it was during one of those hospitalizations, I met a young girl. She was about 16 years old, and she lived close to us. And I
How old are
actually,
you how old are you at this time?
at this time, I'm about 23.
Okay.
And I have three small children of my own at home, and I'm in the
Right.
hospital. And we meet this girl. I meet this girl. I give her my phone number, which, as a nurse, you know, is a big no-no in the psychiatric units. You're not supposed to give your contact information to anybody. But I gave her my phone number, and I said, I found out she lived by us about 8 blocks from us. And I said, if you get out of the hospital and you need some kind of support or something, just call us. You want to go to church with us, just call us. And it was about 5 days later, we got a phone call from her, and her mother was kicking her out. And she became our first unofficial foster child. And that was the beginning of some real healing for me, because I was starting to see how sharing my story with somebody else was helping them in their path. And so we very shortly after that ended up getting licensed for foster care. And once I got licensed to be a foster parent, I never struggled with an eating disorder. I never tried to harm myself, and I had zero hospitalizations for psychiatric issues. So I was just really seeing that if you allowed your past to help other people, it also brought healing to yourself.
Fantastic.
Well, it's encouraging I mean, so many people could have been in your situation and just been the lifelong victim.
Right.
So it's always, and Jim and I have, I'm not saying anywhere near things that compare to you, at least personally, but have some abuse and trauma when we were little
Sure.
kids and stuff. Like one of my many stepfathers, we'll leave it at that, was a Vietnam vet. He'd come home and drink, and he would, same thing. He'd beat the heck out of
Right.
my mom, but he wouldn't physically hurt me or my brother, but he would destroy our things.
Yes.
Stuff that he knew meant things to us. So it was just
Right.
constant emotional. And so I can relate to you as far as that goes, not the sexual abuse part, thank goodness.
Right.
But it is encouraging to see people like pull themselves out of that bad headspace, which you can easily get just
Yes.
sucked down and just not, but you have to make an actual conscious decision to not be that victim. and
You
not
do.
propagate that abuse to your kids. And I
100%.
knew and I knew for a fact, and I even think we're cousins and we share grandparents on our mom's side. And I'm certain that probably back when they were girls, that there was some physical abuse in
Oh,
that
for
house. I
sure.
know there
Yeah,
was.
my mom
You know,
told
it
me
was
about
hush
that.
hush, and it was,
Right.
we're talking late 50s, early 60s,
Yes.
when our parents were, teenagers. And it was never really talked about, but
Right.
we knew it was there.
Yes.
But our grandfather to us was like, he was on a pedestal, and
Right.
so it was never, but but then I think both our mothers, because of the abuse that they got, gravitated toward those types of guys later,
Very common.
which then affected us,
Yes.
in that trauma that we might have had, once again, not physical, but just that mental abuse, and seeing your mom get beat up and black eyes and that kind of stuff. Oh God, I just remember it. It's terrible.
Yes. And it's a very common thing. And it's just this continual generational trauma that gets just continued. Like you said, oftentimes the female will end up migrating towards that which is familiar. And they think that's love. And I'm just grateful. I was 18 when I married my husband, and he was 27. And I just am very thankful that I really think he was a lot more mature than somebody my age would have been. We were married, happily married for 27 years, not abusive at all. But I could have easily fallen into that trap.
Oh, for sure.
Well,
Yeah,
you have
that's
to
a
make
hard
a
cycle.
conscious decision. And I remember when, I met my ex-wife and we had my daughter, the one I was talking about, the nurse, uh, I made that conscious decision. That would never, ever happen.
Right.
And then she had also two stepdaughters that I
Mhm.
raised from 7 and 10 years old. And that I'm still, even though we've been divorced for 12 years, I'm still close with those girls. I have grandkids. They are my true family. And it just I get it. You just have to
Yeah.
make the physical decision to not do that. But my grandmother, once again, the same grandma we were just talking about, I remember when I met my ex-wife, and she was worried that I would be. I remember the conversation in her kitchen. She's like, "Hey, you're marrying this girl, this woman with two kids, 8, 11, 7, 10, something like that. Rick, you really
Sure.
need to be careful that you don't get in a situation where you get falsely accused."
Right.
And I never really had thought about that because I just never did. But I remember thinking, okay, I have to avoid every appearance of any impropriety ever and protect these girls and be their champion and make sure that they don't get in, and keep that cycle,
Sure.
because they had it on their side with their family. So it was,
Right.
but it has to be a
It's
conscious
hard.
decision made.
It does. And you have to decide that if you think about it, if you remain the victim for years and years and years, you've given all of your power away to the person who abused you.
For sure.
Hmm.
You become victorious, and and I don't even say I'm a survivor. I say I'm a thriver, because my past has really made who I am today. And so if you take that power away from them, that you win doubly. And so by not being a victim, you are regaining your power in such a mighty way that I just can't even describe it to people.
Yeah, it seems like the whole victim thing comes up quite a bit with you, Rick, that he's always against, like, not against, I shouldn't say, but you have a hard time with people that play the victim role.
I really
I
do.
do
You
too.
really do. Yeah.
I
So
do too.
I don't have
I
it.
tell people that,
I'm a hard ass with them. I'm like, really, get
yes,
alive.
yes, I am the same way. Yes, I
In
get
certain
that.
situations, I'll be more diplomatic, but sometimes I just throw it out there, and
No,
I just don't have any
I really
tolerance for it.
struggle with that. So when we started doing foster care, so when you, two things, I'm going to go two places. So when you said, your, I can't remember, your wife's mother came to you and said, you have to be careful. Well,
My
oh,
when we
his
grandmother,
started,
yeah,
grandmother.
our
yes,
grandmother.
your grandmother. Okay. So, we started taking care of a lot of sexually abused kids. And so DCFS in Illinois told us that we couldn't hug them. And I said, wait, what do you mean we can't hug them? well, if you hug these kids, then it increases the likelihood that you're going to get falsely accused. And I said, okay, time out. If we don't hug these kids, they are going to crave the sexual abuse that we just tried to teach them is inappropriate because they're getting no touching whatsoever. So that doesn't make sense. So I actually went on a huge campaign. So if you notice my email, it's Hug 'em Crew at Hotmail. And I haven't changed it because that was way back when we started foster care. I went on a rampage against DCFS and I said, we're going to be a Hug 'em Crew. And we're going to take that risk because these kids need to have appropriate hugs. And so all of the license plates on our vehicles were Hug 'em 1, Hug 'em 2, Hug 'em 3, Hug 'em 4. And so in 30 years of doing foster care, we never had one false allegation, but we had very clear, healthy boundaries. But we also wanted to make sure that they knew they were worthy of appropriate physical attention, just like our biological kids were getting.
Yeah, that's so important for kids.
It
When you have all
is.
those studies, back in the day when they'd put kids in isolation and not
Yes.
touch them and not give them love, it's not
Yes.
healthy.
Yeah, and yet it's hard when you're caring for. We were taking in a lot of sexually abused kids that had failed multiple placements, and so it's hard. And those are real life, you know, questions that go through your head on a regular basis. But the other thing I think is interesting, I do a lot of public speaking now, and interestingly, it's oftentimes the 75, 85, 93-year-old women that come up to me and say, I've never told a soul. I was sexually abused my entire life by whoever. And so, because one of the things I say when I speak is it's not the sexual abuse, it's not physically being hit, it's not these trauma things that create the fear and the guilt and all these struggles that you have inside. It's the secrecy around them. And once you start exposing the secret and then even seeing how the secret can be used to help others, it doesn't have that power over you anymore. So the shame and the guilt and the fear dissipate once you start exposing that secret and get more comfortable doing that. So
it's really hard, though. I could see that generation opening up, and it's not, someone's gonna hold that inside them for their entire adult life till they're, like you
right,
said, in their 70s or 80s.
right.
To let that go just must be freeing for.
Well, I tell them, I say, you don't have to stand in front of an audience or write a book and tell an entire world. I said, but you do need to find one person. And oftentimes, as they're leaving, they're whispering this in my ear, and I'm their one person. And so it's just, I pray that them being able to share that with me helps to release some of their shame, guilt, and fear that they often associate with that.
Do you think that your experience in the foster care system I'm going to kind of switch gears here a little bit, is
Right.
kind of an indictment on the foster care system? Because you hear this all the time, where.
I don't. And this is why. I do think there are unhealthy people that seek to do foster care for unhealthy reasons. But I also think there are a lot of very healthy people that seek to do foster care for very healthy reasons. We are going to hear about those unhealthy people that are choosing to do foster care for unhealthy reasons. And those are the ones that are going to make the news. But you're not hearing about the 500 that are doing a remarkable job with their foster kids and keeping them safe. And so back to you when you mentioned to me that you were an RN, it made me think of when I went to get my very first degree as an RN. I had to write a paper, and my paper was entitled, this is back when people were saying, Phyllis, are you doing foster care for the money? Well, at that point, we got paid less than $8 for 24 hours of having a child. And in the state of Illinois at that time, the governor was paying like $11 a day to board a dog. So the title of my first paper that I wrote in nursing school was "The state of Illinois pays more to board a dog than they do to board a child."
How did that
And
go
so
over?
actually, it was well received. It was very
Good.
well received. But my point is, you're going to hear about people that do it for the money. Well, I can tell you from our perspective, we had two small vehicles, a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom house when we started to do foster care. We ended up needing a bigger vehicle and needing to buy bunk beds and needing to do this. You can't do it on $8 in 24 hours and do it right. And so I was able to show people right away that you can't be in it for the money. You can't be in it for the kids thinking that you're wonderful for having rescued them out of their traumatic past, because they're angry. They're hurt. They're feeling like the whole judicial system is their enemy. So they're not going to give you that attaboy. And so you can't go into it for those reasons. You really have to go into it to say, can I make a difference in the life of this child? Can I even try to help them reunify with their parents when possible? Can I view them as not mine? Can I view them as somebody that I'm trying to teach even their parents to be healthier people? So it's just a different perspective, but I do think there are a lot of healthy, good foster parents out there. We just don't hear about them.
Mm-hmm. I have some personal experience in another aspect of my life that these folks had taken in 3 foster kids, 2 older ones like 8 and 10, and then almost a newborn, like a year-old. And right. The older ones within the last 30 days or so had just got sent back to their parents. Now, these folks have had these kids for a year and a half, 2 years. They right. didn't release, DCF in Florida did not release the baby back to the original parents, but opened up a lot more visitations there. But it's got to be, I mean, it takes a certain kind of person to be able to let that go. How do you have a kid in your life that you bring up and nurture and love and try to get back on the right track, and then, oh wait, my mom's out of rehab.
Right.
2 years later.
Yes.
But she's living, in a, I don't know what the situation is. I'm sure you have tons more experience than that on that issue, and just to let them go. Do you keep in touch with these kids after? Are you allowed to be in their lives? How does that work?
It depends on the age of the child. So a lot of the little bitty children that we had don't even know they were in foster care because they went back home. But we keep in touch with a lot of them. But I'll share one experience. We had on Christmas Eve, we got a phone call asking us to take a set of siblings, 3 children. And so we took those kids. They came infested with head lice, black and blue, and very abused, sexually abused as well. And we had them for about a year and a half. Things were kind of stable. The parents had done nothing that the court system had ordered them to do, but the judge decided to send these kids back. And DCFS didn't want them to be sent back. We didn't want them to send back. Foster parents have no voice at all in court, none. But we didn't want them to be sent back, and the judge sent them back, and we got them back 21 days later, more abused. And now they're not only angry at the system, now they're angry with us because they feel like that we let them down and we weren't able to protect them from going back. And so there are lots and lots of struggles, and you have to really understand the dynamics of trauma and abuse and reactive attachment disorder and a multitude of psychiatric issues that these kids come with and struggle with.
Sure, absolutely. I can't imagine.
We were talking about the foster care system and stuff, and you had mentioned this judge, will let these kids go back to kind of
yes.
What you would deem as probably a similar situation they came out of. But
exactly.
The elections in next week, and we're early voting right now. Are these family court judges elected at large, or are they appointed?
Both. Well, some are appointed. So some judges are elected, but then when they go into the specific realm of what they're doing, they're often appointed. Like they might be elected as a judge, but then they're appointed to go into, the juvenile system. So it's a combination of the both.
So do you have recommendation? I have not voted in my Charlotte County election yet. Maybe after we finish here, you can send me over which judges because I haven't researched those guys yet.
So I don't know as much about Florida as I do Illinois and the judges, because I actually sit on the board of directors for an organization called CASA, Court Appointed Special Advocates, and we actually work directly with the judges. And a CASA volunteer is actually appointed by the judges to be the voice for children in foster care. Foster parents are not allowed to be the voice for children in foster care. So a CASA can be the voice for a child in foster care. So because I also live in Illinois, I have been on the board for CASA in Peoria, actually the 10th Judicial System, which covers Tazewell and Peoria County, for about 6 years. So I could tell you every judge by hand there. I haven't learned that in here. Yeah. But it is a plug for CASA. I'm telling you, if you want to make a difference in the life of a child, reach out and find out a little bit about being a CASA volunteer. For 5 hours a month, you can be a huge advocate and voice for a child in foster care.
Really?
Yes.
I wasn't aware that there were like third-party advocates like that.
Yes. So in some states, so by law, all children in foster care have to have a guardian ad litem. And so those are usually attorneys. I can tell you in my experience of having done foster care for 30 years that none of my foster children ever met their guardian ad litem until about their attorney guardian ad litem until about 20 seconds before that guardian ad litem had to go into the courtroom and represent them. They don't know them. They've never talked to them. They have no relationship with them. So there's a real push for CASA workers to also be the guardian ad litem. In many states, they are the guardian ad litem. And in some states, there's an attorney that oversees all the CASA workers, and he puts his stamp of approval, but there's still the GAL for those kids. And so most judges will tell you the first report they want to read is from the CASA worker or the CASA GAL, guardian ad litem, because that's speaking for the child, and that's being a voice for these kids in foster care. Yeah. It's a national program. It's been all over for years.
So you've been doing this for 30 years. At what point did you start doing mission work?
So my first husband passed away in 2006, the first August 6th of 2006. And 12 days later, I started my master's degree in nursing, working full-time, and took guardianship of 3 more kids that year. Wow. So it was in the midst of doing my first master's degree that I started doing international mission work. And I actually, so in my master's degree, I started going on international mission trips. But then when I got my doctorate degree, I actually did my capstone project in Haiti.
Okay.
So yeah, I've gone on probably about 40 international. Again, my past has just brought so many blessings into my life. And I work with abused and vulnerable women and children literally all over the world. My current husband, when he found out I had 13 children, he put his hands up and said, I cannot date a woman with 13 kids. This is not happening. Well, we've been married almost 15 years now, and he goes with me on all my mission trips. And he has fallen in love with these missions. So he and I started a medical clinic in northern India with an organization called Hope Partners International, where they rescue children. And particularly in this facility in Ajmer, they rescue girls that have been rescued from human trafficking and many other abuses. And then we start a medical clinic there that I go there and I see the kids. So yeah.
Was it medical treatment you're giving them, or therapy? Yes. Or what?
Okay. No, I do. Well, I kind of do both. So, I'm a licensed clinical nurse specialist and a licensed family nurse practitioner, but I see them as a family nurse practitioner. But then on evenings, I actually share my testimony with them and I share my story with them. And it was the very first time I did that, about 3 of the older girls from India through an interpreter came up to me. And one of them said, we had no idea this happened to white people. And that was her exact word. And then she said, I can't believe you let your husband stay in the room when you shared your story. Does he hate you? And I'm like, no. I said, there's nothing about my story that should cause me to not share it in front of a man. But in their culture, that's not something they would share with a man. And they truly believed that this was something that was happening in their country and not necessarily in the United States. And then the third person said, I can't believe you're a doctor. They let you be a doctor even though you were abused. And I'm like, yes, they let me be a doctor even though I'm abused.
It really has to be empowering for them to see you as a doctor, to see you as this figure, and then you share your story. I can just imagine the
Yes, I
big
think it
wide
was
open eyes
super
and the jaws
empowering.
dropping.
Yes,
Well, when they
yes,
meet you, you walk in and you're like this bigger than life, rescuer basically.
right, right.
And, probably a little intimidated. And when they hear that from you, it's like getting down on your knees to talk to the 5-year-old. You're on their level and they lose that intimidation. They can really open up. And that's got to just be, like Jim said, really empowering for them as young
It
women.
is. It's not only empowering for them, it's also brings additional healing to me to see that, my abuse was not just for naught. There have been so many good things that have come out of my abuse that I'm quite honestly grateful that I grew up abused and that somehow through God's help, I was able to get through it and give back because there is such a need for people to see other people that have survived similar stories that they have, but so many people don't want to talk about it. Well, I talk about it. So,
Yeah. I'm assuming you're down here in Florida now.
yes, yes.
Do you do some of this work in this area?
I do. I actually do. So I had to cancel two during the hurricane. Milton
Hmm.
mandated that, but next week I'm speaking in Lakeland. In the last probably 16 months, I've had 50 speaking engagements. And
Wow.
so I know I've got 3 in November and 3 or 4 in December and a couple in January, February, and March while I'm down here. And then I've already been scheduled for April, May, and June in Illinois. So I try to make sure I'm scheduling where I'm at, but yes.
Are these like church groups or
It's
foster
a variety
care
of,
meetings
yeah.
or
So, well, last year we have a women's uh, care. It's called Care in Punta Gorda, which is their rape crisis center. And so I actually spoke at an event that they have. So sometimes I'm speaking at rape crisis places. Sometimes I'm speaking at women's groups or churches. I have spoken at Rotary clubs. I have spoken at Kiwanis. I have spoken with 1,100 people. I have spoken with 20. So, and I kind of have about 5 different versions of my talks so that it can be more directed to the audience. I've spoken to judges and social workers. So I've had a variety of opportunities to be able to speak. And I actually am meeting with a magazine journalist tomorrow at Kava here in Punta Gorda, the Kava shop.
Oh, which
And
one? Downtown
um,
Cava?
yeah, well, the one in Punta Gorda.
Yeah.
Is there the one at the train station?
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
one of
I'm
my big
meeting her.
hangouts.
Yeah, I'm meeting her tomorrow at 9:30. They have asked my husband and I, particularly my story, but my husband and I to be the on the covers of the PGI magazine. So they're doing an article for that. So yeah.
Oh, excellent. So
Yeah.
you're obviously a huge success story. I mean, what you've done with your life and, it's kind of like trying to think of that bird that burns up and comes out of the ashes.
Oh, okay. I can't think of it either, but
Now that
The
you put me on
phoenix.
this,
The
the
phoenix.
Phoenix.
Yeah.
yeah, the
Rise from the
Phoenix.
ashes.
You're
Yes.
rising from the ashes,
We're not talking Icarus.
no, of a traumatic life. But you must have some success story from some of the people that you've shared your life that have overcome some of the traumas. What's the number one story that pops out in your mind of those that you've helped?
Oh my goodness. I mean, there's been all kinds. It's been fun for me to see some of our former foster kids do well. It's fun for me to see a couple of them actually went in to become nurses. One of them, she's living in Scotland now. She actually has just got licensed she's married and she just got licensed to become a foster parent. And she's done she was a firefighter and an EMS person, and she just got her master's degree. And she's still stayed super, super connected with us. And she tells us repeatedly that without having gone through her younger years in my home and without seeing my example, it would be hard for her to be as open about her past. And so, I mean, just all kinds of people and just all over the world. I mean, when we think we have it bad here, go to India, go to Guatemala, see a 9-year-old that is pregnant, and I have. See a 9-year-old that has an STD, and I have. It's there's just so much work to do in this area, and I just feel so blessed that I can give a voice to people that don't have a voice.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it must be, you just mentioned those horror stories, and it must be hard to kind of see those things and still keep this incredible attitude that you have. I mean, does it just say, hey, I'm going to do my best to help this person? That kind of gives you some peace of mind or some just peace in
Yes,
your own heart when there's all this evil in the that you're seeing
there is a lot
firsthand?
of well, there is a lot of evil in the world, and I do see a lot of it. But I think there's a couple things. I think when I share with them my story, I think it encourages them to want to get themselves up and figure out how they can move on, and it gives them hope. And so I walk away from every circumstance instead of trying to think about the last thing these people want or need is pity, but they need to be motivated and encouraged and told that they're valued and to be loved
And understood and just
and
listened to,
understood. And
really.
so I try to bring all that to the table as much as I can when I'm with them, and I hope that I've planted a seed, and I hope that 5 years from now they go back and say, I remember this woman and she did it and I can do it. And so I think the last thing they need is for us to pity them or to look at this as, oh my gosh, you've been ruined for the rest of your life. No, you've experienced something that you should have never had to experience, but it cannot ruin you. It absolutely cannot ruin you.
That's great advice.
When we first started this podcast, we had a guest on. I can't remember who it was, but one thing, and Jim and I are combined father of 5 daughters. We have no testosterone in our following lineage here, but
Well, the
so
5 daughters, you've got testosterone.
well, yeah, really. So
or had.
Had.
well, there was this one guest we had, and I kind of sometimes open up a little bit more to certain people and whatnot. And she had said, or he, I can't remember. I think it was a woman. She says, sometimes when your wife or girlfriend comes in and they just want to bitch about their day and or this issue or this problem, they don't want your suggestions.
Amen.
They just want to be listened to.
Yes.
And that was a few months ago. And I'm always the problem solver. So my entire adult, Jim and I are the same age. We just both turned 60 a few months ago. For my entire life, whenever my wife, girlfriend, whatever come in, daughter, well, Megan, you need to do this, or well, this is what you have to do. But I have totally stopped that.
That's good.
And went just to the listening. And then when it's all done, maybe if I do have suggestions a couple hours later, the next day I'll bring it up. That I think is a perfect correlation to what you just said you do with these girls. And they might not want to hear anything from you. They just want to be listened to and have their and just be talked to like regular people and not victims.
Treated
they don't want pity,
normally.
like you said.
Yes, they don't. Right. And one of the things to segue along to encourage you to continue to not try to solve everyone's problems, there's some research done about that. And when we as parents are constantly trying to solve our children's problems or to solve our spouse's problems, we're actually giving them the message that we don't have confidence that they can do it. They need us to do it for them because we don't have confidence that they can do it. So we're actually instilling confidence in our spouse or in our children when we say, and what do you think you should do about that? How can I help you?
Oh, that's empowering there. I like that.
It is.
Yeah. The woman we had on that was Dr. T. She would say, when they get done venting, just say, that sucks.
Yeah.
And just listening. And it really has helped me.
Good.
When Jim wanted to get into this we started off this podcast back in the spring, a little more current events and politically oriented because I dig on that stuff. That wasn't working out so well. So Jim pivoted about a month later into this kind of space. And I've said this to many of guests that I can't believe the mental clarity and internal therapy that it's given me over these months, just talking to people like you about these experiences. Because we don't get open, we're middle class white guys in South Florida.
Right.
We don't see these things. That even if you drive down to Fort Myers or there's some bad parts of Sarasota, Tampa. I mean, this stuff is in our backyard
Everywhere.
but we don't see it in our neighborhood, and especially where you live down here and we live, down here. This is not that type of community. Now, there are certainly those situations in this community, no
Yeah.
matter what the demographic.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And that being said, I mean, how do you, when you talk to these abuse victims, do you find that there are false accusations sometimes that you can't, or women think, or girls think that they may have, hey, I'm not sure, I don't remember, but I think this might have happened, and maybe it didn't, things like that?
So, absolutely. So several years ago, there was a real push on some of the therapy spaces that if an adult, let's say an adult goes into a therapist and they said, I'm having this and this and this and this. A lot of times the therapist would just automatically suggest to them, well, you had to be sexually abused and this had to be this is what it was related to. So there's always, as long as we have imperfect humans in this world, there's always going to be false allegations. There's always going to be false accusations. My job is not to determine if you're telling me the truth or not. My job is just to support you where you're at and let the judicial system work that out or the therapist work that out. And so I don't ever worry about that. If someone comes to me and they say something, I'm going to encourage them. I might send them to my website because I have a lot of resources on my website for them. But I don't have to worry about whether it's a false allegation or not.
That's a good attitude to have, and really, for what you do, the only way that it would work.
Yes.
Because if you had to go down those rabbit holes, that's all you'd be doing.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's just not. And so the other way that I think about it is wounded people that have not healed from their past, wounded people wound people. So whatever that issue is with that person that may have a false allegation, they're still a wounded person that's been wounded. Therefore, they're making the false allegation. They still need support. They still need directed to a therapist. They still need somebody to point them in the right direction. So it's not really important to me whether or not it's a false allegation or not.
I always heard that differently, that hurting people are hurting.
Yeah, well, I've always heard
as wounded.
People wound people and healed people help people. So.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. So we've been asking this question. Phillis DeWitt, what are you doing to make the world a better place?
Well, I don't even think we spent the last hour talking about this one.
It's always that way. I'm wondering if we should start asking at the beginning.
Yeah, really.
Well, I hope that I'm leaving a path behind me that says, regardless of what's happened to you in your past or in your present, you don't have to be a victim. Regardless of what's happened to you, you have value and you have worth. And I am super grateful for my past because I really believe it's helped develop all of my passions that I have in my life right now. So I tell people, oftentimes our passions come from our pain. So whatever has hurt you in the past, how can you use that to help somebody else? Because once you start doing that, you will be helping yourself and helping other people. And so between my mission work and my foster care and my speaking and my book, I pray that I'm leaving a path that people understand that wounds do not have to destroy you, or even your trauma absolutely does not have to define you.
You've mentioned mission work and prayer a couple times. Where does religion and prayer fit into if you're meeting with someone and
Sure.
meeting someone new? I mean, we all know, like, if you go to AA or NA, that's kind of the basis is, hey, find God, believe that, go through these 12 steps. How does that fit into your
It depends on the person. So if the person comes from a position of no faith, we don't really talk about faith a lot. If the person comes from a position of faith, then I tell them a little bit about my story. My second foster dad was the deacon of a church I was attending, the one that abused me. So when people say, but I've been hurt in the church, I'm like, okay, tag, I'm in with you. I've been hurt in the church too. So if you come from a position of faith is not a part of your journey, I'm going to talk to you about things that are a part of your journey and how you can use that to bring healing in your life. I'm not here to try to create Christians out of everybody.
Sure.
But I am here to tell you that for me, my Christian journey has been a huge part of my healing, even though I was hurt in the Christian church.
Can you spend a few minutes on that? Because
Absolutely.
frankly, I'm kind of in the point of my life where I'm going there.
Okay. So spend a little bit on why my faith is important.
Yeah. And
sure.
Yeah.
And how it's helped me. So there's
I want to be converted. I'm open to you converting.
So I can just tell you a few of the stories where God has been so real in my life. And so when my first husband, he was 42 years old, and I was a Christian before then. So there were many, many times, and as a young child, I would just be talking to God because that was the only safe person that I felt like I had. And I remember when I first got saved, I thought, okay, now that God is my savior, he's going to change everything that happened in my life, right? He didn't change anything. I continued to have abuses in my life. And so I started learning that God doesn't save you from these things, but God will go with you through the journey with these things and will love on you and encourage you if you want him to. And he did that for me. But anyway, so my husband is 42 years old, super, super healthy. And I have this feeling where he's going to the doctor for just a regular exam. And I just have this intense feeling that he has prostate cancer. I don't know where it came from. I didn't know anybody with prostate cancer. So I told the doctor, I said, well, can you do a digital rectal exam? My husband's like, thanks a lot. And then the doctor's like, we don't normally start those until they're 50. Does he have any family history? No, nothing. And I said, well, can you just do a PSA? And he goes, your insurance won't pay for that. He did a digital
Insurance
rectal.
won't pay for a PSA?
Not for a 42-year-old healthy person back in the 1990s.
Okay.
No, they will now if you have a medical history, but it was 50 at that point. When my husband got cancer, you had to be 50 to get a PSA and have insurance cover it.
Interesting.
So anyway, the doctor agreed and did a digital rectal exam, felt a nodule. My husband was diagnosed with cancer shortly after that. But let me tell you something else before that. So I wasn't a nurse. I was a nurse then, but 3 years before then, I literally had a dream that I was supposed to go to nursing school. Now we have 9 children living in our house at this point, 9. And I tell my husband, I think I'm supposed to go to nursing school. And he's like, absolutely not. Who's going to do the laundry? Who's going to cook? Who's going to get these kids to their activities? And his name was Tony. And I said, Tony, I really feel like God wants me to go to nursing school. And so I went to nursing school. I went to the 2-year associate program at the local junior college. I graduated in June. And we're having this conversation at my husband's physical in August. And he's diagnosed with cancer. And I told my husband, one of my fears was I didn't want to, my mother and father never went past 8th grade. So when my mother was trying to decide whether to leave my dad, she's like, I have an 8th grade education. I can't. There's nothing I can do to support myself. And I just kept thinking, if something happened to my husband, I have no way to support myself. And I have 9 kids. And so he was diagnosed with cancer literally 3 months after I graduated from nursing school. And I believe with all of my heart that God was directing me to do that so that not only would I have the ability to understand the chemo, the radiation, the surgery, but now I no longer had a fear of not having a way to care for the family if needed. And I can tell you 10 stories like that where I feel like God prepared a way for me. And so my belief in God has nothing to do with the church. or the people in the church or the pastor or my deacon foster father. It has to do with my relationship with God.
I think that's perfect.
That was very well spoken.
Mm-hmm.
Are you converted
it really
yet?
Makes a lot of sense. No, I appreciate. I mean, I'm on a journey right now, and it's kind of
you should come over, and my husband and I would both talk to you about some of the other stories that are even more powerful than that one.
That sounds great.
We should meet up at DTK.
Yeah, we can go to downtown Cava and have some.
That's right.
Have a coffee.
That's right. Yeah.
Going back to that victim mentality, we played hockey. Rick got me into hockey when I was like 9 years old, but in my upper 30s and 40s, would be in the locker room and I'd hear guys complaining about their upbringing and, how bad their upbringing was and blah, 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 and blah. And I would tell them, I would be like, all right, so, up until you were 18, you were raised by your parents. Now you're 36, 40, whatever. So for exactly as long as you've been away from your parents, you've been parenting yourself.
Yes.
So you've had time to make all the changes, all the restructuring, anything else you wanted to do with your life. So quit whining about those first 18 years and just focus on what you've been doing for yourself for the last 18 years.
Make a decision, be a man.
And if you haven't been doing a good job, that's on you.
Agreed.
I agree 100%. One of the contracts, so when a foster child would, and we would take in older kids, when a foster child would move in, we'd have them sign a contract. And it literally said, from this day forward, I cannot blame my family, the judicial system, DCFS, or anybody else for the choices I make or the consequences associated with those choices. They are on me. And I tried to really, and then they would say, you don't understand. And I would throw 2 or 3 newspaper articles about my story at him and say, read this, and then come back and tell me what I don't understand. And so it was very much a part of what we tried to instill in them from the beginning. You had a horrific past. I'm sorry, that's bad. But now you have the ability to make an amazing future.
Right. Make something out of yourself.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Excellent. Not only for yourself, but for people you have in your life and your future
absolutely
your kids and your future spouse or whatever. So
yeah.
Absolutely.
Wow, Dr. Dewitt, this has been a cool conversation.
It has. Yeah.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure to be on your podcast. I've loved it.
Can we do this again sometime?
It's been a pleasure.
I'd love it. That'd be great.
Okay.
And we should meet at Cava. You don't have my card, but I'll send you my I think you do have my phone number. Yeah. So yeah, we should meet at Cava. I'll bring my husband and he'll share some stories with you.
Yeah, that'd be great. I was actually up there last night till like 10 o'clock. So I go there a lot.
Oh, sweet. Okay.
Yeah,
I don't know if you hit the bar scene in Punta Gorda, but next Wednesday night, I play in a local rock band.
Oh, where at?
We'll be at Dean's on Wednesday next week, and then
that's the Mexican place, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll have to look. I know I'm speaking in Lakeland on Thursday, so I'll have to look because we were talking about driving up to Tampa Wednesday night, but
we're always in town, so when we get I'll get we're for certain meetup. And
perfect. Yes. I started to say, let me know where you're playing when, and we'll show up one of the nights. I promise.
Cool.
Sounds good. Again, pleasure having you on the show. We thank you for your time, and what a great
It was great. Thanks, guys.
Thank
you.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
So if you just listen to this podcast and you appreciate the content and the work that we're doing, we would love your support. Look in the comment section of this episode. Subscribe, rate us, comment. This gets our podcast in front of other listeners. And if you noticed, we don't have advertisers. For the cost of a cup of coffee, you can help keep it this way. Become a supporter right now. We'd appreciate it. I'm Jim the Yogi.
I'm Rick the Beach Man.